welcoming new faces. Raise your hand if you've never been to a Western Newcastle region meeting before. Wow, okay. Keep your hands up. We're going to keep this brief. I usually ask people to say a little bit about themselves. Just say who you are. So I'll start here.
I am me. I am Chris Rowe.
All right, Chris.
Janice Colmary.
All right.
Justin Cruz.
Justin Cruz. Kimberly Lee.
Jay Crimmins.
Jay Crimmins.
Tom McCarthy.
Tom McCarthy. Jim Hill. Scott Walker. Russell Lawson. Dan Captain. Jen Rossiter. Suzanne Peoples. Did I get everyone?
That's just people names.
I'm sorry?
Michael Manella.
Michael Manella. Brenda Manella. All right. Thank you very much. Welcome. Let's have a round of applause for people that made it out this evening. And I don't know where you all live, but if you live in the Western region, or even if you don't, you're always welcome at our region meetings last Monday of the month, every month. And obviously, you're always welcome to support us financially at our Morning American Lunch. Shameless plug. I never stop. All right. This format this evening is not going to follow our traditional format of going through old business, new business, and the RD chair updates. We'll save that for our August meeting. What we're going to do at this point is get things started with our statewide candidate form. May I have the statewide candidates please come up to the stage, the ones that have decided to join us here this evening? Come on up. Gentlemen. All right.
Dan.
You're not statewide. You're so eager to talk. That's next.
Now, that reminds me, though, before I recognize these gentlemen, I do want to point out we do have a number of local candidates that have decided to come here this evening and show their support, and I hope and encourage all of you to talk to these individuals. Dan Kapitanek is running for state senate in the 11th. We got Justin Cruz, who is running for state rep in the 26th. We've got Bill Dilks running for state rep in the 24th. Representing Brian Rash, who I know is out knocking on doors. We have Tom McCarthy, so representing the Rash campaign. We have Karen Wiener running for state rep in the 10th. And Jim Startzman running for state rep in the 19th. Did I overlook any candidate? Oh, Kathleen Rutherford is representing Ken Simpler. So, Kathleen. All right. We have with us this evening 4 gentlemen who are running for various offices at the statewide level. Running for U.S. Congress, we have 2 candidates here this evening. We have Lee Murphy and Scott Walker. There are 2 gentlemen running for U.S. Senate. One of them is Robert. He had a previous engagement, but he did communicate that to me beforehand. But we have here this evening Mr. Gene Truono. And running for state auditor, James Spadola. Gentlemen, please have a seat. And just so you all know, Ken Simpler had a previous engagement this evening, but I think everyone in this room is going to support Ken Simpler, right? I mean, he's our guy, he's our incumbent. So let's have a round of applause for Ken Simpler. And Peggy Marshall Thomas, our fantastic candidate for U.S. Attorney General, she also had a previous commitment. I believe she's actually out of town, and she had sent me a note ahead of time that she would probably not be here this evening, but she's doing a fantastic job. She's working the Carnival Fair circuit, getting out there, pressing the flesh, talking to good people. So kudos to her. But she's working very hard, I can assure you. Gentlemen, how are you feeling?
Very good.
Okay, very good. I actually had sent out a note to all the folks in the Western region, and I know that it was passed along to other individuals, that if they'd like a question asked of the candidates, to send it to me ahead of time. Now, having said that, I am the master of ceremonies this evening, so I may turn it over to the floor once we've gone through questions that were submitted ahead of time. Having said that, I am the MC. So if I feel as though you're out of line, I'm going to cut you off. And if you don't like that, It's on my shoulders, okay? Those who know me know that as a region chair, I try to do things in a very collegial manner. However, there's a time when what people elected a chair for has to come forward, and you have to make a call. So if someone is reading a statement, and there's no question mark at the end of it, and I pick up on that, I'm going to cut you off.
It's good to be the king.
It's good to be the king, that's right. Because we're here to learn and to find out about what these wonderful candidates have to offer. So, to start things off, I have here, and I have various papers here that try to collate it all day, all the different questions people submitted to me. But I'm going to start things off with a question for our House candidates, and this is to both Mr. Walker and Mr. Murphy. And it was submitted by a person living in the Western region. That's to both candidates, and I'll start with Lee. What is the amount of money you believe you will need to successfully challenge the incumbent Democrat, and what is your plan to go about raising that money? Lee Murphy, there's a microphone. Take it away.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say good evening to everybody here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dave. And the question in terms of all candidates face this challenge of raising money in a political campaign. I've run for office 3 times before, and it's the #1 challenge of any candidate. To run a race for Congress takes a lot of money, even in this state, in this small state of Delaware. My opponent has contributions mostly from out of state that total almost $1.2 million. That's not money from Delaware. I've called all my friends. I still have more friends to call. I ask them for money every single day. I spend 2 hours in my kitchen on my phone asking my relatives and my friends for 25, 50, or a couple. I ask for a couple thousand. But it's a challenge. Is it necessary to raise $1.2 million for my race, for me? No, because I think I can outwork the incumbent. I certainly haven't seen her on the campaign trail as of yet. So in that category, I think I can beat her. She, quite frankly, thinks she's going to skate back in and for a second term, and I don't believe that that's going to happen. But the money question is big, and if each and every one of you, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you tonight for a contribution to my campaign. So thank you in advance.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Walker, same question. What is the amount of money that you believe you will need to defeat the incumbent Democrat, and what's your plan to go about raising that money?
That's a good question. And is that too loud? It's okay? Okay.
We can hear you.
Good. We as Republicans have got to get it out of our heads that we have to win elections with money. Okay, we win elections with ideas that appeal to the common man. And last time I ran for Congress, 2 years ago, I ran as a Democrat, as you probably all know. Lisa Blunt Rochester and all the rest of the competitors for this seat spent an average of $15 for each vote that they got. Can anybody guess how much I spent for each vote that I got? Anybody? $1.65 per vote. Because my message appealed to ordinary people out there. They knew I was one of them. I wasn't a fat cat. I wasn't associated with rich guys. I was just a working guy out there hustling. And so I think if we would just move away from the money thing and concentrate on being honest and sincere and concentrate on have good, solid Republican values, and you know what they are, the economy comes first, the money will come. That's the truth.
All right. It's always good to start out with a question for people in the primary and see what the difference of responses is. This question is directed to our candidate for auditor. To what extent will the current incumbent, Tom Wagner, be involved in your election bid?
I think I welcome Tom's involvement. We all know he has health issues. So that is to be determined, but I have his full support and endorsement. And his willingness, I think, is going to be more limited by how much he can do, not how much he would like to do.
Very good. To our Senate candidate. Now we're really getting to the policy here. What is your position on Russia's annexation of Crimea and invasion of Ukraine, and by extension, the future of the NATO alliance?
Wow, that's a great question, and very topical and timely. So obviously, I think, can you hear me? Is that good? The annexation was, I think, an unlawful act, and we did put sanctions on Russia because of it. The prior administration took a different approach to foreign policy. I support what the current administration is doing. I think sanctions along with diplomacy are the answer. We've obviously seen that in North Korea. We're not quite through to the finish line there, but it looks like there's some promising results of the negotiations. That wasn't only because we put sanctions on North Korea, but it was because we put sanctions on China as well. So I have a long history of implementing sanctions programs at JP Morgan Chase, at American Express, and at PayPal. So I have a lot of experience in foreign policy in that regard. And I'm sorry, was there a second point?
Just with regard to its impact on the future of NATO.
And on NATO. So, you know, there was a lot of brouhaha at NATO. I think the president called out the NATO countries to pay up their fair share, which they had already agreed to do. They were supposed to make that 2% contribution by 2022, I believe. And I don't think it was unreasonable or even out of line for him to ask that. I think our president tends to tweet a lot and bluster a lot, but I think that's just his style. It's not who I am. But I think if we are going to join our allies, and we have, and support them, they need to step up as well. And I think there's some other things in foreign policy that the administration is working on. There's some talk about potential NATO-type alliance with the Middle Eastern countries, with Saudi Arabia and Jordan, which I think would be a great step to having us be removed from the region ultimately, and allow them to oversee their own foreign affairs and the way they choose. But let's be honest, I think the national security for us is at a very important time right now. Backing out of the Iran deal is also very significant. I never supported the deal from the beginning because I didn't think it solved the problem. And I think there are other ways and other tools we can use to keep peace and stabilize regions around the world. And I think using sanctions, using diplomacy, and garnering our allies together is very important. I think Nikki Haley's done an outstanding job as our UN ambassador. She's tough, she's direct, she's firm, but she's carrying out the policies of this administration, and I think she's carrying them out very effectively. So with those things combined, I think we're going to have hopefully a much more stabilized world and a much more peaceful world over time.
Well, back to our House candidates. Again, this question is directed to both, and this time we'll start with Mr. Walker. What specific votes cast by the Democrat incumbent, Lisa Blunt Rochester, in the U.S. House will you highlight in your campaigning as bad for Delaware?
Thank you. I think we can all agree that her vote against the tax cuts was
Sorry. Her vote against the tax cuts, I think, was the most damaging vote that she made. Now, a second one that she made that I thought was particularly egregious was the vote against the Save Local Small Business Act, which I believe was HB 1443, which really was a camouflage for a push against right to work. And so that really had the potential. Thankfully, it failed, or thankfully it passed, I'm sorry. And her vote against it did not matter. But these are the kinds of things that really damage our economy, especially here in Delaware, where we've got jobs leaving the state, no good paying jobs coming into the state because no employer wants to come here because it's union controlled. And so I could go on and on about her votes. I would say every single one hurt people. And it hurt the people that support her disproportionately, surprisingly. Poor people, minorities, these are the people who were hurt most by her votes. And I don't know whether she understands what she's doing or whether she's under the influence of the party leadership. I don't know. I like her personally, but her votes are really, really hurtful.
All right, thank you. Lee, same question.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the reasons I stepped up and stepped forward to run against Lisa Blunt Rochester, and I like to call her Lisa Blunt Rochester Pelosi in my campaign. This woman does not represent you. This woman does not represent the majority of Delaware residents in the United States Congress. I'll just take a couple. Voting against the president on tax cuts. Voting for more regulations. Voting against the president at every turn. Voting for abortion after 6 months. I could go down, I've read a record, I could go down a list. Sanctuary state. Who here is in favor of that? Who wants to make Wilmington a sanctuary city? This woman, your representative, does not represent your values and your interests. We can do better. The majority of people in this state, okay, are fine, upstanding people with middle-class values, and they deserve better. We deserve better. And we can do better. And as your representative in Congress, I'll represent you, not Nancy Pelosi, not Christine Waters, Maxine Waters. I'll represent your interests. So, her voting record is abysmal, and it certainly, as a Delaware resident, it doesn't reflect my values or my family's values. We can do better, and we will do better.
Thank you. All right, this question is to our candidate for state auditor. You entered the race close to the filing deadline, and you have run for local office and done reasonably well in the race. What experiences do you have that you will bring to the job that qualify for you for the particular role of state auditor?
So I know when people that knew me during my state senate campaign, when I was a Newark cop, if you're a cop, regardless of anything else you might do, you're a cop. Even though my first job was in Manhattan, my first office was in the Empire State Building. I was working for a small finance company, and thankfully it was a very young company, so I worked my way into a management role very quickly, managed a handful of teams where we put out millions of dollars into the hands of small business owners. Newark Police hired me, and when people talk about audits, what are audits but investigations? It's really one and the same. So as a police officer, I've got quite the length of investigative history for financial crimes, felonies, misdemeanors, stuff that audits involve. I got my MBA from Wilmington University, and I was also my union treasurer for 4 years at Newark. So, especially when you look at the Democratic candidates, I don't think there's any question who is the more qualified candidate.
Thank you. This question is directed specifically to Gene Truono.
I figured that.
With your opponent, Rob Arlett, calling for the DoD, Department of Defense, to take over the VA, what is your opinion on that? And what would you push when you get to Washington in relation to veterans health care?
That's a great question. Actually, my campaign manager is a disabled veteran, and he's taken me around up and down the state to meet with various veterans groups. And we've spoken to a lot of veterans themselves. And I think an issue like this is one that needs to be discussed thoroughly with the people that it's going to impact. And I will say that the resounding call for merging the DoD and the VA is rejected by veterans themselves. There are mixed emotions or opinions on the Choice Act, which allows them to use private health care for certain types of things. Although I've heard positive things about the program, it probably needs some work and needs to be fixed a little bit. But I do not believe that the special needs of our veterans should be taken away, because not all procedures and things that impact veterans uniquely can be solved by our normal healthcare system, and that's why the VA was created. The other part that I think concerns the veterans, if they were to merge the DoD and the VA systems, some of the disabled benefit payments would go away, which would grossly impact low-income veterans who rely on that money for rent and food. And so I would not support the merger. I would look for ways we can improve the VA system, but I don't think it's the effective approach, and I don't think it's one that would be accepted by the veterans themselves.
Back to our House candidates, the following two questions are each specifically directed to one of the candidates. So this question is specifically for Lee Murphy. Mr. Murphy, you have run for local office in the Brandywine area on a few different occasions. Having done that and not having won, why do you feel as though running for U.S. Congress is a challenge that you were capable of facing?
Well, that's a great question. Number one, I never give up. And number two, a wise man once said, I think he was president during the Civil War, that sometimes you have to lose before you win. And our president, Abraham Lincoln, I think he lost 3 or 4 times, and then he finally won, and he was president of the United States. So I think what I've learned in my past elections, and I look to a man out there, Al Pagano, who I met in 1982, and I ran for county council in 1984, and he supported me. We didn't win that election, but we ran a heck of a race in a district that was 3.5 to 1 against us. I ran against Harris McDowell, the Senate leader in our state house, twice in a Democratic district, where the registration was 3 to 1 against. We did very well. Going in, I expected to win those races. Did I know the obstacles? Yeah. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But the experience I gained in those races was invaluable. So, when sometimes, it's better losing and doing everything you can, 100%, giving it all you have, and then coming up short. Well, I played enough sports in high school and college to know that you just don't throw in the towel, give up. You come back the next game, you come back the next season, and you just prepare a little bit better. So, this time around, at this stage of my life, with the experience that I've had running and meeting people in Newcastle County and up and down the state now in this campaign, I think I'm uniquely qualified to run for the United States Congress and to be your congressman. I don't think anyone else, including my opponent, even approaches my qualifications. And that's a lifetime of work and dedication that makes me the person I am today. So, I'm qualified. Those other experiences just have made me a better man and a better candidate. Thank you.
This question is directed to Mr. Walker, again, a specific question for his campaign. And again, all these questions come from you, the individuals who submitted them. Mr. Walker, the last time you ran, a number of signs appeared across the state saying vote Scott Walker that did not have any indication as to what office or who paid for the sign. Those signs are appearing again. Are you distributing these signs across the state, or are they being put up by enthusiastic volunteers who might not know the rules about signs?
Thank you. That's not the first time I heard that question. I have put up personally hundreds of signs statewide. 2 hours ago, I was on the Lancaster Pike in Hocassin wrestling a 32 square foot piece of plywood that I painted up a steep hill with a big American flag on it this size. So, yes, I put the signs up there. And yes, some of them do not have the proper wording on there that they were paid for by me. And what was the other objection?
They don't
That they only
specify what race.
They don't, right. My main goal right now is for people to become familiar with my name. I'm not comfortable with the fact, I go to McDonald's, I go statewide to talk to ordinary people, maybe 20-30% have heard of me, which maybe is great, I don't know. But not enough people know my name. And so I want people to know my name, and as this campaign progresses, they will know what office I'm running for and what I stand for.
Okay, thank you very much. This question is for our auditor candidate. Given the fact that a statewide, I copied and pasted all these directly from emails. I'm trying to make sure people's grammar and syntax is correct. Tom Wagner did a remarkable job running for auditor without having to do a significant amount of fundraising. Given that there are so many Democrats running for this office and that you are new to running for this particular office, what is your strategy for fundraising in this particular race?
So, I would not have entered this race unless there was a very plausible path to victory. And if you look at Tom Wagner's history of fundraising, in 2014, I think he spent $30,000 to his opponent's $300,000. So part of the, I'm not going to outraise my Democratic opponent, specifically one. I think in her lieutenant governor race, she raised close to $200,000. I don't think that's going to happen. More importantly than my strategy for fundraising, which I will echo Lee's call for donations, because it is super important. But I do think that, with Tom Wagner, Delaware Democrats recognize the importance of having a member of the minority party act as a fiscal watchdog for Delaware. The analogy that I've been making as I'm speaking with voters is having a Democrat as the auditor is no different than having the fox guard the hen house. And it's very hard for even the most partisan and liberal Democrat to reject that logic. So with that message, with everyone's support here, donations can be made at jamesspadola.com, by the way. Even $5 is appreciated. It's funny, to people not involved in politics, it probably gets obnoxious hearing candidates cry and beg for money. But I think we're over the point of having any shame about it, just because it's what has to be done. But we appreciate everyone's financial contributions and taking the yard sign and all that as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. This question is directed to Gene Truono, candidate for U.S. Senate. And it's a little bit philosophical. Why do you think Delaware has trended Democratic over the past 20 years? And how do you feel you and other statewide candidates can best communicate conservative principles in a way to attract more voters?
So that is a great question. I think, and if you've heard me speak on this topic before, it kind of bristles me to think that Delaware is blue. I'm a lifelong Delawarean, second generation. I tell the story that my parents went to Wilmington High School. They were 3 years apart, but then on Rehoboth Beach. And I actually have pictures of me crawling on Rehoboth Beach in a diaper with a dollar sign in the background. But in any event, I love this state, and I think everyone here probably does as well. And I think there are a couple of reasons why people think Delaware is blue. All the pollsters clearly do. But Sussex and Kent County are very, very red, as you all know. There's more registered Republicans in that county. The reason why they call Delaware blue is because there are more registered Democrats in Newcastle County. And people have said to me, "You're crazy, you can't win because Newcastle County carries the day." And I say to them, not so fast. I believe that Delawareans are moderate to lean conservative, even the Democrats. And I'll tell you, I spent 10 days at the Delaware State Fair from 11 in the morning until 9:30 at night, every day. I kissed a pig, I petted a llama, I fed a camel. And I had a great time. Very tiring, but I had a great time. And I met thousands of people, and I talked to hundreds of people, I'm not exaggerating. And I will tell you, there were 4 types of voters that came up to our booth. The Republicans and the Independents said, "Who are you running against?" And I said, "Tom Carper." They took my push card and said, "You got my vote," and walked away.
That's all I really need to hear.
But the Democrats, there were 3 types, and this is what's very interesting. And so while this is anecdotal and not real a litmus test, but the 3 types were D, Democrats. I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote Democrat, and they would walk away. Most of them wasn't. Very small number of them. The next 2 groups of Democrats were both very interesting. Ones that said, "Love Tom Carper, voted for him every time. He's the best senator we've had. But you know what? It's time for him to retire." These are Democrats saying about our senior senator, who love the man, are looking for change. And then there were other Democrats, including veterans and Second Amendment folks, who said, "You know, I've always been Democrat, don't want to change my party, but there's no way I'm going to vote for Tom Carper. It's really time for change." So I think the one thing that really can push us this year in this election cycle is that people in Delaware are looking for change. People want the conservative principles that I believe in, and I think most all of you believe in, back in Washington. And I'll tell you one last anecdotal story. My mother, settlement attorney for her estate, has known me for a long time. And she said, "Gene, you know I'm a big Democrat, but I'm going to vote for you anyway because I really like you, even though I don't agree with most all of your positions." But she said, "I firmly believe, as a Democrat, we should have representation on both sides of the aisle, because the healthy dialogue and the discussion about policy should be representative of all the people in the state of Delaware." That's my message. I'm going to continue to carry it out. I think we have a great opportunity due to the economic conditions in this country if they keep going the way they're going. And we have some good messages. I won't go on anymore because I've done half of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to our House candidates. This was a late in the day question, and I think that the topicality of it will show when you hear it. To both Lee and Scott, and I'll start with Lee. If elected to the U.S. Congress and confronted with a situation where you may have to shut down the government because the president thinks that that's best to get what he would like done, would you be supportive of a government shutdown? Lee?
Well, nobody wants to shut down the government. Okay. Now we've pushed this envelope many times. in the past. The government, we have a $22 billion deficit. We can't continue to add to that deficit. We can't continue. Congress has a responsibility. The Republican-led Congress has a responsibility, which they're really not living up to, at least recently, to cut spending, to hold the line on spending. The President and Congress have passed tax cuts and unleashed business to prosper and expand. Those added taxes from new business, from millions of people working now who weren't working 6 months ago, will obviously bring down that deficit. But Congress has a responsibility to stimulate the economy through jobs, deregulation, tax cuts. And I will support the President in those areas. But they also have a responsibility to make the hard choices, to curb spending. And God knows we have things in our federal government that can be curtailed, eliminated, that will alleviate that wasteful spending. So, hopefully Congress will have its act in order when I'm there in January. But when push comes to shove, and the government or the President has to make a point, and Congress will not do their job, and a government shutdown happens, that's not something we want to have. If Congress does their job in working with the President, if Congress does their job in working with the President, hopefully that day will never come. But Congress has to step up to the plate, Republicans and Democrats, to get this budget in order and to stimulate this economy.
Thank you. Scott, same question.
Oh boy, I'll tell you. I have a two-word response to the question of whether we should shut the government down or not. And that two words are great idea. Shutting down the government is what we need. That's the cure to the disease. Shut her down. Short and sweet. Thank you.
All right. Definitely the shortest answer yet. This question is for our state auditor candidate. James, over the last 20 plus years, Tom Wagner has uncovered some significant waste and misspending in state government. When you take office, is there a particular area of state government that you feel needs closer examination for misspent funds? Or would you instead simply follow a specific pattern of looking at departments?
So from speaking with some present and former auditors that work there, the job of the state auditor is really a relationship building role, and having good relationships with the heads of different cabinets so they know that they can trust your office if you are investigating a complaint in their department, that you're going to work it in a fair and nonpartisan manner. And I think that the relationship is damaged right now, not from Tom, but from, I won't get into specifics, but if you read the news journal, you know what's going on. But to get back to that question, after that setup, so I'm in leadership Delaware this year, and we had Melanie George Smith, one of the co-chairs of the Joint Finance Committee, speak. And so the way the budget works, the governor writes it, and then the cabinets will testify to what the governor wrote to the Joint Finance Committee. Now, no cabinet secretary that is appointed by the governor is going to say, oh, the governor was wrong. We really need X amount of dollars, not the Y he proposed. And the Joint Finance Committee, part-time legislators, they only look at the marginal change that was requested from the prior year. And what Melanie George Smith said herself, nobody is doing a deep dive of the cabinet agencies to really see how much this would probably fall under the mantra of the auditor's office investigates waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer dollars. Nobody investigates the waste of these cabinets, let alone every 5 years or every 10 years. So I think with greater relationships after some mending, having liaisons in the different departments is a way that we could do a deep dive of the agencies cooperatively, not in a way that would promote animosity or any ill will. But that's my first bullet point, and then working with the nonprofit community to develop metrics for the $45 million in grant and aid that we put out each year to make sure that the most efficient nonprofits are getting the resources they deserve, and the inefficient nonprofits that aren't holding up to what they're supposed to be doing are not getting that money.
Good. Thank you very much. This question is for Gene Truono. What is your opinion of President Trump's nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court, Judge Kavanaugh? And what do you look for in a candidate for U.S. Supreme Court Justice?
That's a great question. Obviously, this is another one of the controversies, or what I call artificial controversies that's been created. I look for constitutionalists. And while you may not agree with every decision or every opinion of any one of our Supreme Court justices, there are many, in some cases, have surprised me. So, if a jurist is one who follows the law and follows precedent, and uses the Constitution as the guide to determine whether a statute is constitutional, if that's the basis of their track record, then I would support them. And having reviewed the record of Judge Kavanaugh, I would support him as well. Do I agree on all of his opinions? No. We're never going to agree on all. But I think it's important that we have constitutionalists on the Supreme Court. And we should stop listening to all the noise in the background. If the person is otherwise equally qualified, then we should support them.
Thank you very much. Question back to our U.S. House candidates. What support are you seeking, or what support have you gotten from organizations outside of Delaware working to get Republicans elected to U.S. Congress? And the person wrote this, and I'm asking this because it seems like Delaware is always forgotten about because we're such a small state. So I thought I'd write that. Lee?
Well, I guess you're talking about special interests and lobbyists. Well, so far in this campaign, the biggest contributor to my campaign was my cousin, Dr. Bob Hall. And we grew up together. At this point in our campaign, as my opponent has done in the previous election, in this election, she's attracted the support from the liberal Democratic Party across the country, special interests, pharmaceutical industry, other industries, other special interests that she represents in Congress. So at this point, it's very simple. We seek all support, and I am open to talking to anybody to seek their support. But mainly, I want the support financially and otherwise from the great citizens of this state of Delaware. Because people from Florida or California don't know Delaware, and I do. And let's make this state great again.
Scott, same question?
Thank you. I think that I would welcome any contribution from anybody outside of Delaware, from the North Pole, South Pole, anywhere. It doesn't matter to me. I got $30 in my checking account right now, and all my money is invested in signs, and my gas tank's about empty. But everything will be all right. God has his hand on my shoulder. He's guiding me, and I feel like I'm walking with the wind now, so everything will turn out all right. And that money will come when the news gets out that the race is tightening up in Delaware for the House, and it's going to tighten up. One of us is going to get to it. So outside interest will think of that, and Mike Castle told me earlier this year that if you get close, the money will come. And so it'll come.
Thank you very much. And this question is directed to our attorney, our auditor candidate. Since your last campaign, and I'm assuming they referred to your state senate campaign, since your last campaign, have you been able to maintain contact with all of your volunteer support, and will that same youthful, energetic group of individuals still be out helping you up and down the state as opposed to just one district?
Yeah, there were a few people that moved away. One guy that door knocked, he probably knocked on more doors with me than anybody. Now lives in Texas, and that was a big loss, but hopefully we'll get him back at some point. But yeah, I have no doubt this campaign will be as energetic as we saw in the past. It's going to be a totally different type of campaign, more unconventional. But yeah, the youthful energy will still be there.
Okay. Question for Gene Truono. And you actually touched on this earlier. There are more Republicans in Newcastle County than in Kent and Sussex. Since there are more Republicans in Newcastle than Kent and Sussex combined, how will you motivate them to get out to the polls? As Kent and Sussex people tend to be Republicans tend to be more excited about getting out and voting Republican.
So, before I answer the question, I just want to say, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, I just want to say that my website is votetruono.com, and we have this handy little donate button right in the center of the screen. It doesn't hurt to push it. So, any contribution would be appreciated. I had to get that in there, I'm sorry. You know, there is strategy for winning in Delaware. I think, again, I'll harken back to the fair. We talked to a lot of people, all granted they were mostly Sussex County and Kent County folks. But there's a groundswell of people that really are motivated to get out and vote. And we'll use the get out the vote strategy. We'll do the phone banks and calling. We'll get people energized and motivated. We've got a long way to go to the general election. There's some of the things that I personally have in terms of relationships with people in Newcastle County. I had served on a number of boards, helping low to moderate income people get into houses, helping elderly and disabled people stay in their homes, helping low-income students get into college. And I think those relationships last long. I'll tell you one anecdotal story. So my barber, when I was 14 years old, I ran into him when we started the campaign, and he said, "Gene, I'll take your yard signs and your bumper stickers and your cards and give them out." So about a month ago, he called me and said, "Gene, you need to get all this stuff over here. I'm all out, fresh out. And there's hundreds of Salesiano grads. All of them are Democrats, but they're going to vote for you." So I think there's a lot to say about personal relationships. We've been working very hard. We're going to all kinds of events. We were at a Methodist church barbecue on Sunday, and we're going to other events throughout the month of August and throughout the month of September. And I think people in Delaware still have a notion when they meet someone, even those who may or may not fully agree with your policies and positions, and you connect with them on things that they care about, like jobs, the economy, healthcare, and healthcare reform. And I think the national debt, which is something people don't talk about often, but I've got suggestions and solutions. And when people talk to you and they believe in you because they believe you're really going to make a change, then I think that can happen. And I think the groundswell, as I mentioned earlier, with the economy improving and people really looking for change in Washington, to to have conservative principles represented, because we don't have that today, will make a difference.
Okay, folks, again, for those of you that don't know how the Western Newcastle region operates, I pride myself on the fact that we keep our meetings, whatever the format, to closing up around 8 o'clock. It's 7:55. I wasn't sure how far these questions would take us through this evening, because a lot of it depended on the answers we've gotten. So we're doing really well. And I'm saying, as chair, that this last question will be the last question for the candidates. And then we will wrap up the meeting. And beyond that, if you have an individual question for any of these candidates, they're going to be mixing and milling around for a while after this forum. So feel free to approach them and ask them. But I'm very glad that we were able to stick to the format that I outlined in the emails to the region. If you submitted your question ahead of time, you got it asked from the podium. So I really appreciate everyone who sent questions. This last question, James, you're not included in this, not because we don't love you, but it's because you don't have a primary opponent. So it doesn't apply. But I figured this is the perfect question to wrap things up on. And so this question is to Lee, Gene, and Scott, because they are all in Republican primaries. And the question is a good one, and I'm glad somebody asked this. After primary day, September 6th, that's my plug there, remember to vote. After primary day, if you happen to not be the victor in your race, will you do everything you can to get your supporters and your organization behind the victor in that Republican primary? And I'm going to start with Lee, and then we'll go Gene, and then finish with Scott.
Being a Republican all my life, I've always supported Republican candidates. And after this primary, I fully expect to win this primary. But after this primary, I will support all true Republican candidates in their quest for victory on November 6th.
So this question's been asked before, and I will give the same answer. I will absolutely support the winner of the primary. And the reason why, I think this year is an extremely important year for Delaware. If we do not turn Delaware red, at least with this one seat, it's going to be harder and harder to do so in the future. And so I think it's extremely important. I've been traveling up and down the states. I'm supporting most every candidate. In some cases, those that are in primaries, I have contributed to both candidates because I think they're both qualified candidates. So for me, this is more about getting back the Senate in the state of Delaware and picking up some House seats and maybe even taking over the House again, keep our fingers crossed, and really driving change in Washington. I would never vote for Tom Harper in this election cycle because he does not stand for the principles that I believe in. He did not vote for tax reform. He voted for the Affordable Care Act, which is failing this country and extremely failing Delawareans, and he's doing nothing about it. When he started in Congress, we had $1 trillion in debt. We now have over $22 trillion in debt. That's unacceptable. We need to cut government spending. We need to cut the size of the federal government. We can do that partially through regulatory reform. And for those of you who have heard me speak on that before, I have a background in regulatory compliance, and I have some great ideas how we can shrink the size of the federal government by cutting regulations, making it more efficient, and have appropriate supervision over our industries that we want to protect the consumers in the state of Delaware and throughout the country. Thank you.
Last time I ran for Congress, as you all know, or maybe you don't know, or maybe you don't care, doesn't matter, I ran as a Democrat. But I know you're not going to hold that against me because I love being a Republican. I love to see my name on a letter with a bar in parentheses around it. You don't know how much I love being a Republican. And I lived in Sussex County. I went to Brandywine, don't hold that against me, okay? But I love going around Sussex County and meeting with Republicans. There's so many of them down there, and we got Republicans here too. And we got to stick together, okay? If Lee wins, you know I'm going to fight for Lee, okay? We're Republicans. You know, it's on our shoulders, Okay, we've got to do something this year. You tell your friends to get out and vote September 6th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, we've been here an hour, and again, I want to thank all the wonderful individuals who over the last month have submitted various questions to me to be asked here this evening. And if you have a specific question for any of these individuals, I encourage you to approach them at the end of the meeting, talk to them one-on-one. These are all fine gentlemen, very approachable, and they're all working very hard to do a good job to be an elected office. And I also encourage everyone in this room to get to know the local candidates that we recognized early on. And as you'll see, many of them have their respective booths and literature out there. I'll make a shameless plug. My lovely wife, Allison, is now the campaign manager for Mike Ramone. So if you want to talk about Mike Ramone's campaign, be sure to talk to her. This is going to wrap up this different format for a Western Newcastle meeting. Our usual meetings, again, last Monday of the month. And so for August, that's August 27th, same time, 7 o'clock. And we meet at Suite 204, second floor over in the Price's Corner Shopping Center. We'd love to have you there. We're going to have a great meeting in August. As we get closer to Election Day, there's going to be a lot of exciting things going on, and we need everyone to be involved in getting our candidates elected. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, as we now approach 8 o'clock, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for being here.